It's upgrade day.
What's up, dude?
How's it going? Hey everyone, I'm here with Gene with eCycle Works. We're going to be doing some upgrades today. We're going to upgrade my cranks, we're going to upgrade my pedals, and I'm sure he's going to find a slew of other things that need to be fixed or upgraded or anything like that. But Gene's been invaluable, and he's been giving me tips. He's been giving me tips and hints and things to look for about my bike and a slew of other things. So I would definitely recommend getting to know your local bike shop owner or mechanic, because guys like Gene are just so invaluable. So I appreciate his work and what he's going to do and what we're going to do today.
Yep, glad to help.
So let's get started. What we got?
Got a brand new GX crank. This is the really cool lunar gray one. They've just updated all these colors. Take a look at this bad boy.
Woo! Nice.
It's beauty.
That is really pretty.
And this is the 170.
Yep.
Which would be much better for ground clearance and
Which
pedal strikes and...
Which is what I have a problem with.
Yeah. And this is the super beefy dub setup, which is a big rigid axle. And then, of course, the best pedals ever.
OneUps.
Yeah.
I went with the silver.
Yeah, it'll look good.
I think it'll look good.
Actually, no, it actually looks like the accent color on the crank.
Yeah. And that wasn't on purpose. That was just.
You're some sort of coordination wizard.
So we're pulling off.
Yep. I'm gonna pull off these cranks here, the NX cranks. We're gonna upgrade them to GX cranks. They do use the same bottom bracket standard, which is nice. It's that dub, 29 mil axle. But you will be getting a chainring upgrade, crank upgrade, which will be lighter, lightweight.
Yep.
Nope. All the new. So if you look at this new crank, it has what looks like a similar interface, but the 8 mil bolt inside that actually threads these two parts together resides underneath this cap.
Gotcha.
And so when you extract that, the threads that tighten it are also the threads that push it back off of the splines of the other side. So that cap right there is basically makes this a self-extracting crank.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and this is not that way, which is extra interesting. And it's perfect time to get all this grime away from your bottom bracket.
I know, now I wish I was just brought my bike wash and everything and just did it all at once.
And this is luckily one of the threaded ones. They put a little grease on from the factory, but I always like to just line some inside the cup of the bottom bracket. Give it a good rub around here. And I much prefer installing grease on the bottom bracket as opposed to on the crank, because you put it on the crank and then you shove this in there, it takes all the grease, pushes it all the way back outside.
Right.
If you put it on the inside of the cup and then install the crank into the cup, it pushes the grease inward instead of outward.
Yeah.
And it makes sure that the whole interface stays a little neater. There's not much you can do on a crank like this for the drive side though. You're gonna push some grease out.
Right.
I just try to set it a little further inboard. Another thing you want to do too is make sure this adjuster is backed all the way out.
Yeah.
Because that's a preload adjuster for the crank.
Make it easy.
Then the only other thing you have to pay attention do is that you get this spacer installed, and that will depend on the width of your bottom bracket shell. So if I remember correctly, for 73 mil boost applications, you use the 4.5 mil spacer. That was what was already here. This crank standard is the same, so there's no point in even looking at it. It's going to be the same.
Right.
But if you do put the wrong spacer in here, tighten this whole assembly up, and it's the wrong width for the shell, you'll crack that preload adjuster right in half, and then you won't have any preload adjustment, which is a big deal because then your crank has all this slop,
Yeah.
which is real not good.
Not good. Not good at all.
Real non-bueno. And usually about this point, just to verify that, I'll just look, put a hand on both sides and like make sure there's a little bit of slop left in the crank.
Right.
Because there should be. If the slop was already taken up by now, you probably have the wrong spacers in the mix,
Right.
Which could turn out badly. Cool.
Woo.
So that's nice and smooth.
That's why I'm having you do mine.
Then we're gonna put the appropriate amount of torque. This is the other thing that people don't do, is they don't torque this appropriately. These get 54 Newton meters, which is quite a lot. So people very often don't torque these correctly, and then they end up coming loose.
So what are the standard lengths of cranks? We're putting a 170 mil on.
Yeah, we're putting a 170. A lot of bikes, for some reason, I don't know what the deal is. Now, I would assume that this is going to change as, you know, newer generations of bikes come out. But a lot of those older, and I mean older, but by like 2 and 3 years ago, came with 175s.
Right.
Which is and was a standard crank length, but it was toward the long side. And now, like, if you go and buy an aftermarket crank, 175, unless you go way out of your way, is going to be the longest crank you're going to find. Road bike standard is 172.5. You can find some 172.5 mountain cranks, but most of the time they go 175, 170, and then some downhill cranks you'll see 165. Same thing for slope style, where they're looking for crazy bottom bracket clearance. But as the bikes as they lower their center of gravity, this bottom bracket gets closer and closer to the ground, which means at the bottom of the stroke, you're way more likely to get a strike. And 170, to me, is the happy medium. You don't really lose much of anything. Your pedal circle gets a little smaller, so your hips are rocking less when you're climbing. And it gives you like less range of motion on your knee, which is good for us folks who are no longer 20-something.
Gotcha.
If this stopped moving, because this runs on a thread right there,
Right.
and if this stops moving, it means we're already pinched against it.
Oh.
And it's another way to check that you have the right amount of spacers in the setup. There it is.
There that's tight.
That's 54 Newton meters. That is on there. Once you've got this torque, I torque it, you know, long before you do any kind of preload adjustment, because if you get this wrong, try to adjust the preload, then torque it, you'll again snap the preload adjuster. So do your torquing before you do this. And you can still see that this has room to turn. See that?
Yep.
That's just rotating here. And so what that does is just takes up the additional slack, and it preloads the bearings in the bottom bracket. And I basically go until I start feeling a little drag. I don't want to like force it much more than that. And then back it off just a little bit and make sure there's no play in the crank. It still spins freely. You're not necessarily looking for a spin that goes forever. That's kind of a misnomer. That has nothing to do with how smooth or frictionless these bearings are, really.
Right.
And then you're just going to tighten this tiny little screw. I don't know if you can see that. It's a tiny little bolt right here.
Yep.
Just tighten that guy up, and that just cinches that whole ring down onto the threads that it's riding on and locks in the preload adjustment.
Okay.
I'm just looking for that gap right there to close.
Yep.
Because of the tiny little 2 mil Allen to adjust that. You don't want to put a lot of torque on it. But it's plastic, so that flex, it keeps it tight. So there you go. Sweet. That's that. So here's the PSA, everybody. Make sure that this thing is covered in grease. All these threads need to have grease on them. and then I just run my finger around and make sure that's spread nice and evenly. It's a common misconception that people think that they put their pedals on too tight and then that they can't release them later on. That's not really the issue. The issue is that the galvanic reaction between an aluminum crank and a steel pedal spindle. It's right around the corner, right here. Can we walk out here? Let's walk out here and I'll show you. Oh, Penny, come here.
Hola. ¿Cómo estás? What's your name? Are you Penny?
Okay, easy.
See, this is what makes videos interesting.
It is pretty interesting. And there's no shame in, not remembering that one of your pedals is reverse thread.
Yeah.
OneUp does a really nice job of showing you which direction is tight.
Yeah.
But the left pedal must be the left pedal, and this is as you sit on the bike. It'll be your left pedal, and it's a reverse thread. All right, so the way I really like to do this is I'd actually insert, because this guy doesn't have any flats on it, as you can see.
Yep.
Insert my Allen wrench through, put it on the thread, or into the socket of the pedal, and then follow the threads in. You need to do like reverse it at first for the first quarter turn, and then start turning the correct way. Cool. That's good. It's not going to go anywhere. All right.
Explains.
Now we're going to do the easy side.
Easy.
The non-confusing side.
The non-confusing way.
Yeah.
One thing I want to ask. So, if you look at my old pedals, like,
Tiny platform.
well, all of them are bent to all get out. Like, does that mean I got them raised too high?
Yeah, your pins?
Yeah, my pins are all just like...
Honestly, this is probably a rock strike.
Oh, okay.
Because, realize that this is also the bottom of the pedal. Or the
Gotcha.
top of the pedal. Just depends on what you're riding that day.
Right.
This could be flipped either way at any given time. So,
Gotcha.
yeah, I mean, the reality is that, yeah, you're going to destroy pins.
Right.
But, yeah, this is probably a rock strike. You'll see that,
Gotcha.
see the deformation in the plastic right there? I'm probably too close. See that deformation in the plastic? That's probably a rock, and then that just leads right to that pin, which is bent.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
And that's why they give you, that's why they give you some additional...
Yeah.
4 additional pins in the event that you do exactly this. You can just thread them out and install new ones.
Nice. Yeah.
It's a pretty big difference.
Big difference.
And then if you look at it from this angle, you can see the stack height difference.
Yeah.
How much
Man.
thicker this guy is.
It's like half the thickness.
So not only are you gaining the 170, so you're gaining 5 mil of clearance on the bottom.
Yep.
You're also losing 5 mil on top,
Yep.
which is excellent for your hips and for your knees because you're making a smaller circle.
Right.
And then the larger platform is also great. The one thing this pedal did have going for it is that it's concave, which is really what you want because that's where your the ball of your foot wants to land.
Right.
And you'll see some people complaining about how there's a bump here on some pedals, and that you can actually feel that in the ball of your foot when you're pedaling.
Right.
This is concave, as is the OneUp.
Yeah.
So that's a big one. But these are much bigger platform for anybody that wears a shoe that's any larger than like a 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
This is like a must. It is for me at least.
Any last thoughts to my selection?
No, I mean it's a great choice. If you've got a SRAM drivetrain already, upgrading from an SX or an NX crank, particularly ones that don't have the dub bottom bracket, because some of the older ones actually, the SX cranks did have a 3-piece setup where the 2 crank arms were individual, and then they had like a bottom bracket that had 2 splined axles sticking out of both sides of it. Those are very common on a lot of OE bikes. Like OE setups, and SRAM sells those really only to OE manufacturers and not to the public as an aftermarket option. So the biggest upgrade is going from that type of bottom bracket and crank setup to one like this, which is the dub 29 mil axle, and we're talking an axle that's that big around, that's hollow, and it's also part of one of those crank arms. So the stiffness and serviceability, being that that's a self-extracting crank, it's easy to pull it. It's a threaded bottom bracket. The dub interface is simple. It's as simple as just sliding the crank through and then adjusting the preload adjuster. So it's very straightforward and easy to work on. It's super stiff. It's super durable. No, I mean, there's really not much of a downside to that standard. I love the pedals. The pedals are an excellent choice. I mean, it's a very personal preference thing. There's no right or wrong answer, but
Yeah.
I've enjoyed those a lot. Everyone I've recommended them to and buys them also loves them. I run them on all my personal bikes.
What I love is this lip, because one thing, and you can
Keeps
see
your
it. You can see it on right
heel
here.
rub.
I get heel rub because I'm too far in. The
This
other pedals
kind of
don't.
locates your foot in a way.
Yeah.
It kind of keeps you. It also keeps you off the crank, because I mean the other thing that you'll get too is you'll actually get crank rub.
Yeah.
That you won't probably feel as much as the heel rub, but you'll see guys that have, you know, this portion of the crank right here is just rubbed all the anodizing off, and it's just raw aluminum from them having their foot jammed up against that crank as they're pedaling.
Which I'm sure I've done.
Yeah, I mean it's just kind of natural, but that little hump actually kind of helps locate your foot, and I think you'll probably find that people have a love-hate relationship with that hump.
Yeah.
Probably some people love it for that exact reason, and some people hate it because they feel like they can't get their foot inboard enough. I don't know. It doesn't seem like enough to make that much of a difference in terms of foot location, but yeah, it's a super solid setup. I would be happy with that for sure.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out the video. I would love to know what pedals and cranks you love to have on your bike. I'd love to find out what options are out there, and it's great to share that with the community. Also, please comment. Let me know if you like this type of content. I plan on doing more of these types of videos, so let me know if it's of value to you, as well as if you'll like and subscribe and share. That would be awesome too. Until the next video, stay safe and keep on riding.